Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the Fighter's Block. I'm your host, Jesse Rivas, being joined by my partner in crime, as always, Mr. Joe Gilpin. How are you feeling, Joe?
I'm feeling good, Jesse. How you doing?
Doing great, man. Doing fantastic. A lot of good fights. A lot of good fights coming up. I mean, last week was a little bit of an appetizer. We have one of the biggest UFC cards of the year, and we also had the return of Canelo Alvarez. Where do you want to start?
Man, you tell me. Where are we going? Take me on a fight. Take me on a fight journey.
Let's recap the week that was, because it wasn't necessarily the biggest fight. It wasn't necessarily like the biggest challenge. Actually, Abney Yildirim is a 40-1 underdog coming into this fight. But what it was a celebration of Canelo and his crossover from being the premier Mexican boxer in the world to actually taking the throne as the premier Latino fighter in the world.
He looked amazing. He went in there, blasted out his mandatory challenger in just a couple of rounds. The challenger ultimately didn't deserve to be there. I think it's fair to say at the end of the day, when you look at the result, finished it on the stool. And Canelo did kind of what everybody expected him to do. They expected this to be a show pony fight where he comes out, gets led around the ring a few times, and that gets to go back home. And that's exactly what happened.
I think the promotion kind of let you know Yildirim didn't have a shot. The post-fight interview let it know that he really shouldn't have been in the same ring as Canelo. But the politics was there. This was the mandatory fighter. Every other cut was Canelo saying, hey, guys, I really don't even want to be here. But we have to, if you want to make a unification fight against the guy he's fighting next, which is Billy Joe Saunders, in a unification fight in the zone, Cinco de Mayo weekend. Now, what do you think of this fight?
That's a way better fight. I think this fight really speaks to all of the weaknesses of the mandatory system.
Yeah.
And how it's been bastardized from what it was meant to be, where it's meant to be preventing you from running from your tough challengers. But now it's just these alphabet organizations kind of throwing somebody in there because they need to make sure that they can wag their dick. It is really a big part of it. And they can kind of keep their divisions moving.
I wonder how much money was thrown into Yildirim having the shot, because if, as we mentioned last week, he lost in the first round of the World Boxing Super Series.
By knockout.
He lost to Anthony Durrell. Anthony Durrell, who fought the exact same night but was not fighting Canelo.
And has not fought since the Durrell fight. No, I mean, there's no two ways around it. It had to be a pretty significant. But how did he, even with no wins, no good wins that we can speak of, only losses against, any recognizable competition worth writing home about, and this guy's your mandatory challenger, it's just such a bastardized system. And we're moving on to Billy Joe Saunders, who presents much more of a challenge. I don't know if it still presents enough of a challenge to speak of against Canelo, to be honest. I know people want us to believe that, and the promotion wants us to believe that this is going to be a more competitive, I mean, it would have to be a more competitive fight than what we just saw, almost by definition, right? But I'm more excited for that fight, certainly, but I still feel like it's Canelo's time, and he's just running through everybody.
I feel like this fight 2 years ago would have been the best fight you could have made at middleweight, or one of the best fights you could have made at middleweight. Billy Joe Saunders was coming off amazing victory, beating David Lemieux, showed his boxing skills, showed that he was back. He looked phenomenal. And then you also had Canelo, who wasn't as good as he is now. Since then, we've seen Billy Joe Saunders not bring his power up to 168, and Canelo just looking better and better each fight. Even though Billy Joe Saunders presents a lot of the things that have traditionally frustrated Canelo, I question if it's enough. I question if it's enough without the power that he had at middleweight.
I think so, 100%. I think that there is a definite size and oomph difference between the two. And I think that, I think the closest thing you could maybe compare Billy Joe Saunders to in Canelo's record might be Lara. But even then, I still don't think he has the slickness and the movement, the footwork of Lara. And I just feel like you see how much Canelo's improved. I still feel like that's a big, big fight for Saul Canelo Alvarez. But it's a much more worthy fight, right? And it moves us closer to the ultimate goal. Canelo with 4 belts.
Man, yeah, 4 belts, just Billy Joe Saunders, Canelo, and we have Caleb Plant, are the three champions in his weight class. Canelo being the number one guy, Billy Joe Saunders being the number two. Caleb Plant, do you see anything that he presents? Because
nope. Sure don't. Funny you ask. Sure don't.
Because he had the opportunity to fight Canelo next. Canelo actually picked him first. He was like, "Hey, let's go," and he was like, I need to take a mandatory fight." Well, no, there's no mandatories. We're all good. He's like, I just been out for a long time. Let me just get a preview fight. It looks like he's actually going to sit out actually until September. So he basically already has the fight, assuming Canelo wins.
I don't think that's the worst idea. Maybe it was too quick of a turnaround for him because Canelo's trying to turn these guys around really, really fucking fast.
Yeah.
And so it might have just been a little faster than he was used to or comfortable with because he did just fight. Who knows? But ultimately, no, man. I don't see anybody in Canelo's way in his march towards 4.
Now, the one fight that has been thrown around for either December or next year, this is one that it's more like boxing nerds are trying to like hype up to happen, which is a potential Canelo versus Berta fight. Do you feel like that's just way too much size and way too big for Canelo, or do you give him a real shot in that fight?
Well, the question is, at what weight is it going to happen? Is Beterbiev coming down? Well, they've already said, Canelo said that he's not going to 175 anymore.
Oh, okay.
So it is what it is.
This is the fight that the Max Kellermans, the ESPNs, all those writers are trying to push. And typically when that happens, they do eventually have some kind of pull. But if he's not going back up to 175, then
he said Eddie Reynoso forbid him from doing it again.
Yeah, because I don't see a Berta. I see that just being too big. Bivol will be someone who'll be willing to come down because it's a small 175.
I think if anything, we might see that. We might see him getting pressured into dropping because it's only 7 pounds. That's doable. That's very doable. People do that. It is possible for him to come on down. But even then, you start talking about depletion and it starts being a whole thing. And is Canelo going to use his influence to get like rehydration clauses and stuff like that?
Mm-hmm.
We'll see it if it comes to pass. But until then, it's just chatter for the media heads, right?
Yeah, pretty much. One guy who the media heads have been building up a lot, and the whole presentation was about how he's the next big thing. I'm talking about Cyril Gane, who actually fought against Rosenstrike on the main event of the UFC Fight Night this past weekend. Did he live up? Did he live up to the hype?
So yes, I think ultimately yes. He fought a really, really dangerous heavyweight who has shown that until the last moment of a fight, the last punch of a fight, he can still find ways to get you out of there, right? He proved that against Alistair Overeem. Jesse, I didn't realize that when we've been talking about Cyril Gane, this is a guy who started training anything at all 6 years ago, 6 years ago. And now he's top 5 heavyweight in the world. It's unbelievable. So I think ultimately he cruised to a 5-round kind of formulaic decision. He showed some really cool stuff in there, though. He showed some really interesting reads. He showed some really interesting decision-making skills. It made me really excited for his future at heavyweight. And that way, it's a win. And he got past a tough challenger in the division. And good news, he did it in a way where he might not have to fight him again, because who's going to want to see that fight? It was boring. You didn't see it. Did you watch it?
I watched it twice just because I was kind of bored from it. The first time I saw it, I fell asleep. And it didn't help that I saw it immediately after the Joseph Parker fight. So both heavyweight fights had me completely bored. I actually enjoyed watching the Canelo destruction better than watching these closely competitive, boring heavyweight fights.
Well, it's kind of crazy what so Canelo, the WBC decides that fucking Canelo needs to fight this mandatory. So everybody else has to move all their shit off of that day. We talked about you were on that thing a couple weeks ago. Like, it's fight season. We're starting fight season. This to this time, and okay, but we're not gonna have a good fight for 2 weeks, just so you know, because we have this weird Canelo bullshit that we have to not counter program against. But when it comes to Cyril Gane, Jesse, something I want to talk about. Heavyweight's kind of having a little moment, right? This is really smart matchmaking to have a bunch of heavyweight main events in a row, because now it starts to set up the matchmaking kind of naturally, right? And it starts to set you up at a point where people start matchmaking these people in their mind. Derek Lewis, Alexander Volkov, and Cyril Gane all just won in the last month. between these guys, Curtis Blades is still around. You have Rosenstruck is still around. You have Francis Ngannou on top. Stipe has at least a few fights left. I feel like people have been saying Stipe is going to retire for like 5 years already. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like you have this crop of heavyweights at the top that's very exciting, I feel like. And I feel like heavyweights finally seeing this turnover.
You know what it kind of reminds me of? About maybe 3 years ago with boxing, they had the March of the Heavyweights, which was every single March, they had a card that would highlight the next up and coming heavyweight. So you had Dillian White, you had Wilder, you had Joshua, and it was just week after week after week. And it kind of created the heavyweight division that we have now, where we're all anticipating this Fury versus Joshua fight. We're all anticipating, well, that's kind of the only fight now. It's kind of come to a conclusion, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm. But the baddest motherfucker on the block is. I can't wait.
Yeah. Speaking of the baddest motherfucker on the block, let's talk about the fights coming up this weekend. Do you want to start with the boxing or you want to start with the MMA?
Is there boxing? Oh, I guess we have the one. Let's start boxing.
Let's talk about her. She is one of the greatest American boxers in history. The only asterisk is, since she's female, no one cares. But we care. As fight fans, we want to go ahead and highlight her. Clarissa Shields makes her return. She's going to fight against Marie-Eve Dicaire, who's the champion for the weight class below. She's the super welterweight champion, moving up to fight against Clarissa Shields. It's going to be an all-woman pay-per-view for $30. Do you think that's a good price point for Clarissa Shields?
I think that's the exact right price point if you want to set this up for Clarissa Shields' main event. They're trying to test the market. I think Clarissa has earned that as a boxing name, is her ability, because that kind of comes with any fighter. There needs to come a moment where it's like, hey, let's try him out on pay-per-view. Is this a pay-per-view star or not? And Clarissa's been on a hot streak, and if you're going to try it with somebody, try it on a hot streak. Let's give it a shot.
Do you feel like this might be her last fight in boxing, because she did sign to become an MMA fighter? Do you think this might be the last? This might be the end for Clarissa Shields?
Depends on how much money she makes.
Absolutely.
Is ultimately the answer. If she feels like she can keep getting paid, she'll keep doing it for sure. She's not leaving boxing because she wants new challenges, all this. And no, it wasn't paying what she felt like she deserved, is ultimately what it was. It wasn't getting her the stardom that she felt like she deserved. And she looks over at MMA and what Amanda Nunes is doing, and she thinks, well, I could do that. I know how to fight better than half these girls. And she probably does.
I think the biggest example is Holly Holm. Holly Holm was once the pound for pound best female fighter in the world. She was gearing up to be a pay-per-view star, but it just was not crossing over. The US was not really accepting female boxing. So she went to MMA, and look at her. She became a megastar. Even now that I think she's like has a losing record now, she still draws more people than any boxing fight she ever had.
100%. 100%. I mean, she just, she hasn't been a draw. I don't know what to tell you. And she's fighting to care that, I do not care. Most people do not care. You know what I mean? When it comes to Marie Dicaire. And that's not to be mean, but that's to tell you what the numbers say. That's to tell you that this girl, for as skilled as she is, she's 17-0. She has 17 decision wins. That's not exactly the traditional model for building up fans in boxing. It just is what it is. The sweet science will only take you so far when it comes to the box office. Mm-hmm. And Clarissa can deliver that wallop, but we'll see. In terms of how many buys it's going to get, I have no idea. $30 is a great price point, but Clarissa is taking on essentially a body bag. All of the promotion is off of Clarissa.
Oh, yeah. A great champion, not taking anything away from her, but she is now in her mid-30s, Dicaire, and she's also moving up in weight. So she's coming in as a smaller and older fighter, and also the less accomplished fighter. She actually was professionally trained in karate and then brought that over to boxing. So it's one of those where I just don't see a winnable scenario for her. But $30, great price point. Another pay-per-view that we have this weekend.
It's a bad fight when that's what we're complimenting. That's a bad sign. It's not good.
If we're going to pay $30 per main event level match, this next pay-per-view actually lives up to the build. I'm talking about UFC 259 with the main event, champ versus champ. We got Jan Blachowicz versus Israel Adesanya in the main event for the light heavyweight title. How excited are you about this fight?
I'm very excited. If we actually have a fight season, this is probably the actual start of it. I feel like we said the Canelo fight was the start of it. I remember even thinking at the time, like, maybe let's start with a fight that we're going to, like, watch when it happens live. You know what I mean? Not just like, yeah, I'll catch it tomorrow. I know what the deal is. Man, this is an amazing fight. This is a great card. 4 UFC champions, 3 title fights. Israel Adesanya, my fighter of the year for last year. Has just looked unstoppable. Jan Blachowicz, amazing career turnaround. Knocked out Dominic Reyes, who should have beat John Jones in his last fight. He's the man at 205 pounds. But the story is, can Adesanya get over the hill of becoming a UFC double champion? Right? Blachowicz has been very overlooked in this, and I feel like unfairly so. He's very skilled. He's very skilled. And Adesanya has had a lot more stumbles than I feel like people realize because of his amazing performance against Paulo Costa. And so because of that, I feel like people are it's recency bias. I feel like there's some recency bias at play here, where even though Jan's last performance was so impressive, Adesanya's been so white hot that people don't look back. Could have lost against Romero. Got busted up against Kelvin. Got busted up against Vettori. Not busted up in the face against Vettori, but he dropped a lot of rounds. It was a very close fight. There's been a lot of close fights. There's been a lot of close moments, right, is what I'm trying to say here.
Blachowicz coming back from a 6-year unimpressive streak. I mean, he was the champ at KSW. He was like the #1 star of their promotion. They brought in stars who were former UFC guys, former Pride guys to build him up. He came to the UFC and didn't look impressive. Lost to Jimmy Manua, Corey Anderson, Alexander Gustafsson. Pat Cummings, not the best loss on that record, but then made an amazing comeback. I mean, the knockout of Luke Rockhold, I think, was the match that kind of started opening some eyes of, okay, things are changing for him. And one of the big things he said is, his personal life, getting his personal life together, getting married, and expecting their first kid and having the first kid changed the way that he was actually approaching his goals. So I think that, he's got legacy. He's got the fact that he went back to Poland and he became an even bigger star and became like a huge icon over there, that he's got a lot on his shoulders coming into this fight.
Absolutely. His run has been really good, but even stylistically, he brings things that I think can make this fight very interesting. His tendency to kick out of these clinch exchanges, where Adesanya, you're going to see it. People are going to finally start catching on to this. You're nodding. Do you know what I'm about to say?
No, I was thinking about his kicks. His kicks were fantastic.
They're good. So Adesanya, whenever he circles out from something, he usually does that big lean, that Fat Joe lean back, right? And then he circles out to his side. And people always try to aim for his head because they see that's where like the action is. You know what I mean? But I think Blachowicz in the past has seen that against some people, and he's been smart about not going to the head, but about then kicking to the leg or kicking to the body, which is still there. You know what I mean? Man, he killed Dominic Reyes to the body.
Dominic Reyes flip out and moving out in a very similar motion. I mean, not as good as Stylebender, but he did have a very similar slip out motion that kept getting caught with the leg kick to his ribs, which eventually was completely bruised. It's going to be very interesting because he also brings a size difference. I know they keep saying that Adesanya has fought all the way up to heavyweight in kickboxing, but this is a whole different sport. How do you think the weight's going to play an issue for Israel?
I think it's a big factor. I think it's a factor that nobody's talking about, and people are trying to overlook it a lot. And they're trying not to really put their critical thinking onto it, which sucks. Yeah, Jan Blachowicz has he's won 8 of his last 9. I think 3 of them are by submission. This guy has ground skills. Fought Jacare in that stretch. Fought on the ground with Jacare. I wouldn't, he didn't beat Jacare on the ground, but he's shown that he's very capable there. And man, this ground and pound stuff, when you talk about weight disparity, that might be the biggest problem when it comes to being the smaller guy, is taking these ground and pound shots, because you're not only accepting their weight, you're then having to deal with shots and strikes, and gravity is compounding things. I I think weight and strength is a huge fucking factor. These weight classes are 20 pounds
20
apart.
difference.
There's a reason in boxing when we talk about people who've won, world titles in 4 weight classes. Did you see who it was? When they were doing it for the fucking Adrian Broner fight, it's all guys in the 130s and 140s and shit. Because the weight classes are 5 pounds apart. That's where these guys win their world championships. You don't tend to see 4 division world champions when the guys start at 175 pounds. James Toney, but that's it.
Yeah.
One guy, and he had to punch his head retarded to do it. It doesn't happen very often. So, yeah, I feel like it's a big factor. What do you think?
He also didn't put on muscle. He just got fat and was like,
shit. Yeah, he ate his way into it. I'm not exaggerating in any way.
You know what makes me very curious is because there's winnable strategies for both guys. Let's say that we're playing the UFC video game and you're actually guiding one of the fighters in this match. What do you think the best strategy would be for Blachowicz to win this fight?
Blachowicz, go to the legs pretty early. I would say see if you can initiate some clinch work and see if you can initiate not even takedown clinch work, but even just clinch work where you can pin for long extended periods of time. And then I think that eventually see if you can start to open up with a kick and work your kicks up the body and keep your hands moving is what I would try to do. But those kicks low early have got to be a little bit bigger. Clinch work if he can get it, and keep your hands working.
All right. Now on the flip side, what if you're Adesanya?
Circle and move always. Never be a stationary target for Blachowicz. I would say keep the kicks coming up the middle. A strong teep kick, especially against a bigger guy who's looking to pressure in, is always going to be a good idea. And then do what you do. Counter. Find your counters. Find your openings. Get him biting off of those fakes and feints that you are, so amazing with, and start to snipe out.
Man, the big question I'm going to see is because when I see them 20 pounds different, I see Adesanya have such a significant speed difference, but that 20 pounds is going to weigh you down a bit. And it's going to be very interesting to see how that's going to look like in action with the extra pounds in and being with the bigger fighter who, we've seen him slow down faster fighters. He's not the fastest fighter at light heavyweight, but what he does is he's very good with timing and getting you to slow down. As you mentioned, the body work, the leg work. This is going to be a fantastic match. Part of me says, okay, is this going to be Forrest Griffin versus Anderson Silva? But another part of me is like, is this going to be Max Holloway moving up to fight against Dustin Poirier? And if I have to pick, and maybe it's just because I'm a fan, because I've been following him all the way since KSW, I got to go with Jan Blachowicz on this one.
God damn it, you stole my hot take. Nobody else has been picking Jan. And I was gonna you pick Callum Smith to beat Canelo. We are not the same. No, I think that people are being straight up disrespectful to Jan's chances, and yeah, I'm picking Jan as well. I think Jan has a good chance of winning this fight, and I think he's going to find a way to do it. And I think we're gonna come away and we're gonna say if they were the same size, Adesanya probably gets him.
Here's a question though: because I've seen it before. So when a fighter goes up in weight and then comes back down, are they ever the same person again?
See, here's the thing, though. Adesanya is not putting on any size for this, and he's talked a lot about that. He's going to weigh in at like 195. So I feel like that's where a lot of homeboy, man, who went up. Say again?
Roy Jones,
man, went up, won a heavyweight world title, came back down and was, a shell. I think it fucked up Anderson to a level we don't talk about because he went up and he started fighting the James Irvins and Forrest Griffins of the world, and then he would come back down and he would fight Patrick Cote and have a weird performance, Talis Lates and have a weird performance, Damian Maia and have a weird performance. It's all in the same stretch. Then he goes 185 permanent, and or at least like he rededicates to it again, and he starts churning out way better performances after you could tell his body has had time to adjust. I guarantee you that he fucked up his body because I remember he got way bigger for some of those fights at 205.
Yeah, I remember he became amazing, and then he just wasn't for like a long stretch,
like 2 years. And man, it was his body composition. He put on probably 10, 11 pounds of muscle. It fucked with the weight cut. when he came back down, to middleweight, and it's like that.
All right, so we got our picks. So we both got Jan. It's gonna be fantastic to watch that. Man, the co-main event is a fight that the UFC has been wanting to spoon feed us for years. They've been wanting to make this fight happen. It is the former Invicta champion Megan Anderson versus Amanda Nunes, the greatest, the GOAT, the best female fighter of all time. And I'm going to say this regardless of sport. I don't care if you're a kickboxer. I don't care if you're Muay Thai. I don't care if you're
greatest female boxer.
I put her above female boxer. She's the best of all time, Amanda Nunes.
And tough to argue because you look at who she's beaten, and she's beaten everyone. There's no one you could add to that list. There's no. She beat Miesha Tate, right? I think she retired.
Yeah, she beat Miesha Tate.
Holly Holm. Okay, this is just the current run. Okay, this is not even including people she beat back before her last loss to Kat Zingano. We're talking Shayna Baszler, Sarah McMahon, Valentina Shevchenko twice, Miesha Tate, Ronda Rousey, Raquel Pennington, Cyborg, Holly Holm, Jermaine Durandame, Felicia Spencer. Now we got Megan Anderson, I apologize. The resume is absolutely impeccable. There's no two ways around it. This girl is the greatest we've ever seen. There's no there's no consideration. Is this the last fight ever? Is this the last fight ever at 145? Because they have no fights scheduled. It's just been this weird, this is the last person in the division that she can beat. There's nobody else at 145.
This is the last real 145. Everybody else has been someone who's moved up. This is the first legitimate 145-pound fighter. Not that Amanda Nunes is a spot that exists in the UFC. She's since Cyborg.
Since Cyborg, I was going to say. And you look at her resume. I mean, she's 3-2 in the UFC. Her wins are over Kat Zingano. She beat Zara Farron, and she beat Nora Dumont. And then she loses first round to Felicia Spencer, and then she lost over 3 rounds to Holly Holm. This is not the resume of somebody who's beating the greatest of all time, unless it's a total shock, right? But this would, to me, be Matt Serra versus GSP. This would be the biggest upset in women's MMA since Holly Holm, Ronda Rousey. It's what it would take. It would take a Holly Holm, Ronda Rousey style affair.
But going into Ronda Rousey,
we're going to say the same thing. Please, I already know what you're going to say, and I absolutely agree.
You had a run. You had Holly Holm was undefeated. She was a female boxing world champion. She had done so much. She was accomplished. You could see ways that she could beat her.
That's what I was going to say. You could see ways where, okay, if she keeps it on the feet, maybe it's something. But with Megan, I don't see it. She's going to get killed.
And Ronda was she was getting out of shape. She was doing movies. She was focused on everything else. Amanda Nunes, for as great as she is, as amazing a resume she has, she hasn't really translated into dollars. She hasn't earned what other female fighters have earned.
She hasn't earned what Ronda earned. She's earned quite a bit. Let's not downplay. I feel like you might be a little shocked at how much Amanda Nunes is earning.
She must be
my mother knows who Amanda Nunes is.
Home.
What?
She must be a minimalist because I saw her home and it didn't look like other UFC fighters' home. So maybe she's a minimalist, but I was like, ooh. It doesn't.
No, I think you're just being a cunt.
It doesn't look like you have greatest of all time money is what it looks like.
I've seen her home. I thought it was nice.
It was nice, but it wasn't greatest of all time. I'm expecting.
Okay, well, you're used to seeing the ugly, tacky homes of Floyd Mayweather and shit, not a nicely decorated house of 2 professional lesbians.
Leo's
the houses that you think is
a palace. He has a villa. That's Leo Santa Cruz. Most people who know who Amanda Nunes is don't know who Leo Santa Cruz is.
Bro, I'm telling you, her house is nice. Why are we talking about this? This is the game.
All right, so we both got Amanda Nunes on this fight. This is a fight that I think we could both easily agree upon. So let's move on to another battle between a champ and a number 1 contender that's highly competitive. It's a 50-50 fight. It is a fight that we're both really excited about. It's another person who man, is looking like, could he be one of the greatest of all time at one time at some point, or is this where we're going to find out that he's not? And that is Petr Yan will be defending his title against the biggest challenge of his career so far against Aljamain Sterling.
Bro, both these guys are some of the greatest, could end up being one of the greatest of all time. They're both already so far down on that progression.
Yes.
Yeah, but Petr has a good resume, a decent UFC resume, but when you look at guys that are ranked in the top 15 right now, he's only actually beaten one of them, and that's Jimmy Rivera, right? And that was a fight that I don't want to say he didn't shine. He did very well for himself, but it's not like he blew Jimmy out of the water in the same way that he blew, Uriah Faber out of the water. And even Jose Aldo, I know Jose's amazing, but Jose's on the back end of his career, and he had a lot of struggles early with Jose Aldo. Aljamain Sterling, on the other hand, despite definitely some struggles in the UFC, ask Marlon Moraes knocking him out in about 10 seconds. But this is a guy who seems to have figured things out. And he's worked his way up through a lot of these tough contenders, beat Jimmy Rivera, beat Pedro Munoz. And then he goes in, absolutely blows the doors off Corey Sandhagen in 2 minutes in a number one contendership fight. And it's just an undeniable performance. One of those performances that says, I'm here, this is my shot right now, give it to me. And these guys are going to take each other on. Whoever wins is the undisputed number one motherfucker on earth right now.
Man, I don't know who you're going to pick, but I gotta go with Sterling. I feel like he's on top right now. I feel like his progression is finally what we thought was going to happen when he came in as a prospect. He's doing amazing things in there, and his team is phenomenal. He's training with Matt Serra and all those guys down in New York. I mean, I think this is tailor-made. This is his moment. Would he be the first champion of Jamaican descent in the UFC?
Yes, I believe so. I can't think of another one. Man, it would be absolutely incredible. I want Aljo to win. I am going to go with Petr, though. I think Petr has just shown a big toolkit. I feel like over 5 rounds, he's shown a lot of maturity. He's gone through some real motherfuckers before. I'm going to go with Petr Yan.
Man. All right. Okay. What do you think is how do you think the fight plays out?
I think Sterling comes out, and I think Sterling is I don't want to say he's going to fade, because I don't think he's going to fade, but I just feel like Petr is just going to pick up over time like he usually does. And I feel like just that combination work late, I feel it's going to be a great fight. But I feel like Petr is going to steal away some of those later rounds and pick up a decision. That's what I think. I feel like if you were to ask us 6 minutes in who's going to win the fight, like those live betting odds, like 6 minutes in, are going to have Sterling way ahead, in my opinion. But by the end of 25 minutes, that's not what, that's not
even
as important as it gets to
now. I'm 50-50. Like, I keep jumping back and forth. I have to pick a winner, so I'm going Sterling, but it is a very 50-50 fight. And actually, I think this is going to be your fight of the night. So there's one fight not to miss. You don't want to go out and take a piss. You don't want to go out there and get some food. This is the fight that you want to sit there and be glued to your seat.
I agree. And there's a fight that I will tell you can skip in a minute. So I'm excited for that.
Go for it. Tell us what other matches on this card do you want to talk about?
So there's actually 2 fights where I'm not convinced they're going to be very action-packed. And that's Islam Makhachev, who brings a very Dagestani wrestling blanket style to the cage, fighting Drew Dober. And by the way, Islam's amazing. I'm not saying he's not one of the best fighters on earth, because he is. He's top 10. He's about to prove it. Or at least he's about to get a heck of a lot closer. Drew Dober's super tough. Drew Dober's just one of those guys who shows up in shape, ready to go everywhere, knows his wrestling, knows all the best practice. He just kind of does all the stuff that people who are good at MMA are doing right now. And he is good about doing it all pretty professionally.
Good.
Exactly. He really is. He's ranked like 15th in the UFC at lightweight, and that's incredible. But that's also like, he's a guy I question the ceiling, but prove me wrong. I feel like Islam's going to hold him down for an extended period of time in this fight. That's what this fight is for. There's a lot of guys out of the Khabib Nurmagomedov camp who feel like Islam's the next guy, and who say this is going to be the guy who can take over at 155 for the Dagestani representation now that Khabib is 100% retired. And another fight that I'm not sure is going to be particularly entertaining, Jesse, I feel like Alexander Rakic is going to just keep Thiago Santos at bay with some of his outside striking. I feel like Thiago's going to have trouble marching in and taking over the same way he was kind of able to blow some of these dudes' doors off at different points in his career. He's coming off like double, triple knee surgery.
I think Thiago is being fed here. I think he's in a losing streak, and I think this is one of the losses they're kind of building up to eventually giving him the pink slip out of the UFC.
Could be. I don't think they want him gone necessarily because he's, with Yuna Kunitskaya. But I think it's just they're recognizing that, like, hey, you need to keep up if you're going to be a top 10 guy. And if you're not, let's find that out, right? Yeah. Especially since, is it the kind of thing where he left it all in there with John for that one night where he was fighting with no ACLs, no MCLs, no anything? Was that just everything that he had? And if it was, you respect that. Yeah. Right? This guy went to a world title fight. He left everything that he had in his career there. I respect guys like, man, if you're going to get a world title shot, I'd rather hear that than that fucking Paulo Costa shit this weekend. Did you hear that?
No.
You didn't hear this?
No.
He went Deontay on it. He did almost a full Deontay. He said that the reason that he lost to Adesanya is because he was drunk.
What?
He said the night before he couldn't sleep, so he drank an entire bottle of wine. And this is it, like, because this was, remember, he had to fight their time at like 8 a.m. or whatever. And he said he was drinking at like 3 a.m. And he said by the time he got in the cage, he was still feeling it.
What?
Yes, is this not the dumbest excuse you've ever... Guys, you don't have to admit it. Jesse, people have forgotten a very important modern day philosopher, Shaggy, when he said, it wasn't me. Never admit your L's. Never admit your, there's a reason Chael Sonnen walks around saying, hey, I've never lost a round and I've never lost, and I'm undefeated. Right? Because, if nobody thinks it's true, but if you keep saying it, eventually it becomes a gimmick, right? You can kind of put, the bigger point here is like, don't fucking admit that you did that. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. You know what I mean? Just,
wow.
What are we doing? What are we doing?
It's like, all right, if it's a lie, it's a horrible excuse. That's one of the worst excuses for losing ever. Just make that up. If it's true, it's probably one of the dumbest reasons to lose a fight because you purposely got drunk and you weren't prepared for the fight. Either way, if it's true or false, it's the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my entire life.
Yeah, there's no good. There's no sunshine here. Only pain. Yeah, so that was very stupid. But we respect guys who go in there and leave everything. That might have been Thiago Santos kind of to throw a bow on that. But I think Rakic is going to, unfortunately, kind of boringly, I would not expect him to get a performance of the night bonus in this fight, is my expectation. He's good. He's very good, but he's boring.
You know where I think some of the performance of the night bonuses might come is from that undercard. That the prelims. This is one that
that's not fair. He's good when he knocks people out, but his last couple fights have been a lot more boring, if I could say.
I agree. Sorry. This is actually a card where it's not just the main card. It's not just the pay-per-view. If you don't have the pay-per-view dollars and you're not sure and you're on the fence, are you going to order this event? Check out the prelims because they're pretty hot. We got Dominic Cruz, the former bantamweight champion, returning and main eventing against Casey Kenny.
You still there, Jay?
Yeah, I'm here. Did it freeze?
No, you just stopped talking and didn't say it. I thought you were going to like key me up with a question or something. I agree. He is fighting him. You didn't. Maybe you should. Maybe you just freeze. Did we just speak that into existence?
I think that we just had a little bit of interruption there. Hold on 1 second. Are we back?
I don't know. You tell me.
Are we back? Say something.
I'm going to keep talking. So we had this fight with Dominic Cruz. You fix yourself. We got this fight with Dominic Cruz and Casey Kenny. Casey Kenny is a young up-and-coming contender, but I think this is very much a fight to figure out if Dominic Cruz going forward is going to still be a factor. Because Casey Kenny has shown himself. Okay, you're timing me?
Yeah, there's an audio issue here. I think you're frozen. There's an audio issue.
I'm not frozen. You look frozen.
I'm frozen? Hold on, let me end and restart.